Imagine a child who has never experienced love, one who has never felt the warmth of acceptance, yet finds themselves in the midst of life's fiercest storms. Now, think of a child who, despite facing rejection, loneliness, and even betrayal, rises up stronger, more determined, and more certain of their future. Do you wonder what made them resilient? What kind of power did they possess as they faced the trials no child should ever endure? The truth is, every chosen one of God has walked this difficult path in their childhood. But here's the reality: they didn't just survive, they were destined to thrive. Today, as we look into the lives of those who became great servants of God, we'll discover a profound truth. Every chosen vessel has undergone a period of preparation that was hidden in the early years of their life. The same struggles that might have seemed like obstacles at the time were actually God's way of building them for the great purpose He had planned for them. And so, my dear friends, as you listen to this message, remember, if you feel like you are enduring something no one else understands, you're not alone. Every great man or woman of faith has walked through this. Stay with me, for by the end, you'll realize that your trials are the very things that will position you for the greatness God has for you. Every chosen one of God, from the moment of their birth, is marked for something far greater than they can possibly imagine. And yet, God does not choose His vessels lightly. His choices are often accompanied by seasons of hardship, seasons that seem to stretch us to our limits. But what many fail to see is that in the midst of these struggles, God is quietly working behind the scenes to refine us, strengthen us, and prepare us for His perfect will. In the Bible, we see this time and time again. Take Joseph, for example. As a young boy, he was despised by his brothers and sold into slavery. But God used this betrayal as the very means of elevating Joseph to a place of power in Egypt. It was in the pit, in the prison, and in the silence of his circumstances that Joseph's character was shaped. His childhood struggles were not the end, but the beginning of God's divine plan. God was working through his pain to position him for a future he could never have imagined. We also see this in the life of Moses. As a baby, Moses was hidden from Pharaoh's murderous decree. Yet, in the quiet of his childhood in Pharaoh's palace, he was being prepared for the day he would lead Israel out of bondage. What appeared to be a life of luxury was actually God's perfect plan for a future deliverer. The rejection he would later face and the wilderness journey would only strengthen him for the task ahead. It is in our own lives, too, that we must understand. God allows certain trials to enter our childhood not because He is indifferent to our pain, but because He is shaping us. He is teaching us reliance on Him. He is teaching us perseverance. He is teaching us to trust Him even when we cannot understand the path we are walking. The Apostle Paul tells us in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. This is the promise that sustains us. It is the assurance that even in our darkest moments, God is at work, orchestrating every detail for His glory and our good. And what of the times when we feel alone? When God's voice seems silent and the weight of our circumstances bears down on us, even in those moments, God is near. He is closer than we can imagine, and His silence is not abandonment, but an invitation to trust Him more deeply. Remember the words of Isaiah 41:10, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." For those who are chosen by God, every moment of hardship has a divine purpose. Your pain has not been wasted. The loneliness you feel today is preparing you for a ministry of compassion. The rejection you faced will become your testimony of God's faithfulness. The trials of your childhood are the very foundation on which God will build His mighty work in your life. There is a moment in every chosen one's life when the call becomes clear. The struggles they have faced are not random. They are the tools God uses to sharpen them for his purposes. Like David facing Goliath, they are able to stand tall because they have already faced smaller giants. And when that time comes, they will rise to the challenge, knowing that the God who brought them through their childhood trials is the same God who will give them victory. As we reflect on the lives of those chosen by God, we see that their greatest strength was forged in the fires of their youth. They may have been misunderstood, they may have been pushed aside, but in the end, God's hand was upon them, preparing them for a purpose that was greater than they could ever have imagined. So let us take heart. If you are walking through a difficult season in your life right now, take comfort in knowing that it is not the end. It is the preparation for something greater. You are being made ready for the call God has placed on your life. You are his chosen one, and he will see you through every trial. In the end, every chosen one will look back and see that the very struggles they faced in their childhood were the stepping stones to their calling. They will realize that God was with them every step of the way, even when they couldn't see it. And so, my dear friends, take heart. The trials you face today are preparing you for the greatness God has planned for you. Even before we take our first breath, God has already marked our lives with purpose. His divine plan for us does not begin when we reach a certain age, nor does it wait for us to be equipped with all the knowledge and wisdom we think we need. It begins long before we even understand who we are or why we are here. From the moment of conception, God knows us and has set us apart for something unique, something greater than we could ever imagine. This is not a coincidence or a mere accident. It is the sovereign hand of God at work in the very fabric of our being. As we look at the lives of those chosen by God, we see that their stories often began long before their destinies were fully revealed to them. Consider the life of John the Baptist. In Luke 1:15, it is stated that he will be great in the sight of the Lord. Even while he was still in his mother's womb, God had a plan for him before he could even speak his first word. Similarly, Jeremiah the prophet was called by God even before he was formed in the womb. God says to him in Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." From the very beginning, God's hand was upon him, shaping him and preparing him for a life of purpose. This early divine involvement in our lives often goes unnoticed in our childhood. We may not understand why things happen to us, why certain doors are closed, or why certain challenges arise. Yet, through every moment, whether it's a moment of joy or a moment of pain, God is actively involved in shaping our paths. He knows the end from the beginning, and every single step we take is part of His perfect plan, even when it doesn't feel like it. As children, we often walk through life unaware of the grand purpose that is being cultivated in us. Our experiences, whether positive or negative, serve as the foundation for what God intends to do through us in the future. These early years of life, even though they seem insignificant, are filled with divine potential. God is at work even when we are too young to recognize it. It is in this early stage that God begins to lay the groundwork for our character, our gifts, and our calling. He places within us strengths that we may not understand at the time, and He allows us to encounter situations that will build resilience. The challenges we face, whether through family struggles, social rejection, or personal loss, are not just random events. They are part of God's eternal purpose. He allows us to face these trials because they prepare us for what is to come. Just as the difficult moments in Joseph's life were the very things that shaped him into the ruler he would become. At times, it may feel like we are walking in circles, that we are stuck in the mundane or the painful, but God is never absent. He is intimately involved in every detail of our lives, even before we realize it. His hand is on us, guiding us, even when we are too small to see the path ahead. And so, we must trust that the God who has known us since before our birth will continue to guide us through every stage of our lives, shaping us for the purpose He has destined us for. The trials we face in childhood, though often misunderstood, are an essential part of God's preparation process for His chosen ones. These early hardships may seem like burdens or even punishments at the time, but in the grand scheme of God's divine plan, they are shaping us, molding us, and preparing us for the roles we will play in His kingdom. Just as a sculptor chisels away at a block of marble to reveal the beautiful masterpiece inside, God uses the trials of childhood to refine us, to build our character, and to fortify us for the calling ahead. In our youth, we may experience rejection, failure, or loss, and in those moments, it can be difficult to see how these experiences could possibly contribute to our future. We may feel abandoned or forgotten by God, especially when the pain feels overwhelming and unending. But the Bible reminds us that God never abandons us. Psalm 34:18 assures us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. These moments of hardship are not signs of God's absence. Rather, they are part of His loving process of refinement. In childhood, we often don't have the maturity or perspective to understand the significance of what we are going through. But when we look at the lives of biblical figures, we see that many of them had to face significant struggles and challenges as children. Moses, for example, was born into a time when Pharaoh ordered the death of all Hebrew male babies. His mother, in faith, placed him in a basket and sent him down the river, trusting that God would protect him. Moses' childhood, marked by danger and uncertainty, was not wasted. God was using those early years to prepare him for the incredible leadership role he would later take in delivering the Israelites from slavery. Joseph's childhood was another example of divine preparation through hardship. He was rejected by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and falsely accused. All these trials seemed to work against the promises God had given him, yet each one served a greater purpose. Every hardship Joseph endured was shaping him into a man who would one day be in a position to save nations. What seemed like rejection and betrayal was, in fact, God's way of positioning him for something greater. As chosen individuals, we too will face trials that seem senseless at the time. Whether it's bullying, family struggles, or personal battles, the pain of our childhood can feel isolating. But it's important to understand that God is using these trials to strengthen us, build our endurance, and teach us lessons that will be vital for the purposes He has in store for us. These challenges will not last forever, and one day we will look back and see how God used them to prepare us for something far greater. In Romans 5:3-4, we are reminded that we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. This passage speaks to the transformative power of hardship. God allows us to go through difficult times because He knows that these experiences will develop qualities in us that we cannot develop any other way. We will gain perseverance in the face of adversity, develop a deeper character, and ultimately learn to place our hope fully in Him. So, while the trials of childhood may seem overwhelming at the moment, we can trust that God is at work. He is using every challenge to refine us, to prepare us for the greater purpose He has for our lives. In His perfect timing, the struggles of our youth will give way to a future filled with His promises, purpose, and glory. In our early years, we often face feelings of insignificance and obscurity, as if no one notices us or understands the depth of our pain. These experiences can lead us to question our value, our worth, and whether we are truly seen by God. But in the midst of these feelings, it is important to remember that God sees us, knows us, and loves us deeply, even when others may overlook or dismiss us. The Bible is filled with stories of individuals who were overlooked, forgotten, or considered insignificant by the world, yet were chosen by God for extraordinary purposes. Consider the story of David, a young shepherd boy who was overlooked by his own family when the prophet Samuel came to anoint a king. In 1 Samuel 16, 10-11, when Samuel asked Jesse if there were any more sons, Jesse didn't even consider bringing David before the prophet, as if David was too young or unimportant to be chosen. But God saw something different. In 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord tells Samuel, "Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." While others may have failed to see David's potential, God saw him as the future king of Israel. God chose him not because of his age or status, but because of his heart, a heart that trusted in God and was willing to follow his will. Similarly, when God called the prophet Jeremiah, he reminded him that even though he was just a young boy, he had a plan for his life. In Jeremiah 1:6-7, Jeremiah responded, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I am too young." But God reassured him, saying, "Do not say, I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you." God does not look at our age, experience, or outward appearance. He looks at our hearts and our willingness to obey his call. These stories reveal an important truth. Our value and purpose are not determined by how the world views us, nor by our circumstances, but by how God sees us. As children, we may feel unnoticed or unimportant, but God sees us as his beloved, chosen ones. He knows the gifts he has placed inside of us, even when we are too young to recognize them ourselves. Just as he chose David and Jeremiah in their youth, he has chosen each of us for a specific purpose, regardless of how insignificant we may feel in the moment. The truth is, God often uses the overlooked and the underestimated to fulfill his will. He delights in working through those who are considered least in the eyes of the world, because he knows that their humility and dependence on him will allow his power to shine through. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 1:27, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong." When we are young, it may seem like we are insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but God is laying the foundation for something much greater. The pain of feeling overlooked, the struggles with self-doubt, and the moments when we feel invisible are not wasted. They are part of God's preparation for what he will do in and through us. God uses these times to refine our hearts, to teach us humility, and to help us grow in faith and trust in him. We may not see it in the moment, but every hardship, every overlooked moment, every tear shed is being used by God to prepare us for the extraordinary purposes he has in store. When we feel unnoticed, we can be certain that God sees us. He knows our every struggle, and he is using it to shape us for the greatness he has planned. So, never let the world's view of you define your value. You are chosen, you are seen, and God has an incredible plan for your life. As we journey through childhood, there are moments when we face isolation, loneliness, and a sense of abandonment. These feelings can be incredibly difficult to understand, especially when we feel abandoned by those who should care for us. But the truth is, these periods of isolation can be powerful times in which God draws us close, strengthens us, and prepares us for the greater work he has planned for our lives. In the Bible, We see many examples of individuals who experienced times of deep loneliness, yet these were the very moments when God was closest to them. One of the most profound examples of this is the story of Moses. Raised in the palace of Pharaoh, Moses was initially separated from his own people, the Israelites. Yet, after he fled Egypt, he spent 40 years in the wilderness, living as a shepherd in isolation. These years, marked by solitude and struggle, were not wasted. In the wilderness, God transformed Moses from a prince into a leader who would later deliver his people from bondage. It was in those lonely years that Moses learned to rely completely on God, to hear his voice, and to understand his ways. Without the isolation, Moses would not have been ready to lead a nation to freedom. Similarly, consider the life of the Apostle Paul. Before his conversion, Paul, then Saul, was a Pharisee who believed he was serving God by persecuting Christians. After his dramatic encounter with Christ on the road to Damascus, Paul was blinded and led into the desert. For 3 years, Paul spent time in isolation, away from the public eye, as God shaped and molded him. It was during this time that God revealed to Paul the gospel and prepared him to become the greatest missionary the world has ever known. His time in isolation was crucial to his spiritual growth and his understanding of God's will. God often uses seasons of isolation to prepare his chosen ones. When we feel alone, we are given the opportunity to develop a deeper intimacy with God. These quiet moments allow us to hear God's still, small voice more clearly. In isolation, God shapes our character, teaches us patience, and builds in us a trust that he will never leave us nor forsake us. Hebrews 13:5. In childhood, when we experience moments of feeling left out, neglected, or misunderstood, we may think we are being punished or abandoned, but God is working in those times. He is drawing us into a deeper relationship with him. Even when we feel as though we have been forsaken by everyone else, God is there, shaping us, preparing us for the future he has planned. Isaiah 41:9-10 reminds us, I took you from the ends of the earth, from its farthest corners I called you. I said, you are my servant, I have chosen you and have not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. These words are a powerful reminder that God is with us, even in our loneliest moments. As children, we may not fully understand the purpose of our isolation, but it is in these times that God is refining us. He is strengthening our character, building resilience, and teaching us to depend on him alone. It is often in our most lonely and difficult moments that we experience God's presence most profoundly. Just as the Lord was with Moses in the wilderness and with Paul in his time of seclusion, he is with us in our moments of isolation. These times are not wasted. They are moments when God is preparing us for a future filled with purpose and glory. So, if you feel alone, abandoned, or forgotten, remember that God is with you. He has not forsaken you. In the quiet, in the solitude, God is shaping you for something greater. Trust him in this season, for it is part of his perfect plan. You are not abandoned. You are being prepared, refined, and strengthened for the incredible purpose he has for you. During childhood, many of us experience moments when we are forced to face overwhelming fear, uncertainty, and doubt. These moments of fear often seem insurmountable, making us question our ability to cope and whether we are truly equipped to handle the challenges before us. Yet it is through these moments of fear that God shapes and strengthens us, teaching us to trust in his power, his faithfulness, and his protection. In the Bible, we find numerous stories of individuals who faced deep fear, but each one of them was able to overcome through their trust in God. One of the most powerful examples is the story of Joshua. After Moses' death, Joshua was called to lead the Israelites into the promised land. The task seemed daunting, leading a nation of people into unknown territory, battling formidable enemies, and fulfilling a promise that had been handed down for generations. In the face of such fear, God spoke to Joshua repeatedly, offering words of encouragement and reassurance. In Joshua 1:9, God commands, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." These words were not just a reassurance of God's presence, but a reminder that Joshua's fear was not a sign of weakness, but an opportunity to rely on God's strength. Fear is a natural response to the unknown, but God does not want us to live in fear. Instead, He calls us to face our fears with faith, knowing that He is with us every step of the way. David, as a young boy, also faced fear when he encountered the giant Goliath. Goliath, a towering warrior of the Philistines, challenged the Israelite army, and fear gripped the hearts of all the soldiers. Yet David, filled with faith and courage, stepped forward to fight. His trust was not in his own abilities, but in the Lord's power to deliver him. In 1 Samuel 17:45, David says to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." David faced fear, but instead of succumbing to it, he trusted in God's ability to overcome the impossible. Fear is not something we can always avoid, but it is something God uses to teach us to depend on Him. When we face fear, we are reminded that we are not in control, but God is. We are reminded that we do not face challenges alone. He is with us, guiding and protecting us. In times of childhood fear, whether it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, or fear of the unknown, God is inviting us to trust in His power and His plan. Isaiah 41:10 offers a beautiful promise for those who are afraid. "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." In the moments when we feel overwhelmed by fear, God's word assures us that He will not leave us. He will strengthen us in our weakness, give us the courage we need, and help us overcome the fear that threatens to paralyze us. When we face fear as children, it is important to remember that these moments are not only about the fear itself, but about how we respond to it. Fear provides us with an opportunity to grow in our faith. It is a chance to learn to trust God more deeply, to experience His power, and to realize that we are never alone. Just as He was with Joshua as he led the Israelites into the promised land, and with David as he faced Goliath, He is with us in our moments of fear. The fear we face in childhood may seem overwhelming, but it is through overcoming these fears that we are equipped for the future God has in store for us. As we lean into His strength, as we trust in His promises, we will find that the fear that once seemed insurmountable will no longer have power over us. Instead, we will emerge stronger, more courageous, and more confident in the faithfulness of our God. In childhood, many of us experience times of failure, mistakes, and disappointment. These moments can deeply affect our sense of self-worth and make us question whether we will ever succeed or find our place in the world. Yet, it is precisely through these moments of failure that God often does His most profound work in our lives, teaching us resilience, humility, and dependence on Him. The Bible is full of stories of people who failed, stumbled, or made mistakes. But God used those very failures to mold them into the people He called them to be. One such story is that of Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples. Peter was passionate and zealous, but he was also impulsive and prone to failure. His most significant failure came when he denied Jesus 3 times on the night of Jesus' arrest. This moment of betrayal was devastating for Peter. He must have felt like he had failed Jesus beyond repair. But what makes Peter's story so powerful is not just his failure. but how God used that failure for his glory. After the resurrection, Jesus appears to Peter and asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" John 21:15-17. With each question, Peter responds affirmatively, and Jesus restores him, commanding him to feed my sheep. Peter's failure, though deeply painful, became the very catalyst for his restoration and empowerment for the work God had for him. Jesus showed Peter that his failure was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where Peter would be used mightily to lead the early church. In the Old Testament, we also see the story of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers and falsely accused of a crime he did not commit. Joseph spent years in prison, facing one setback after another. His dreams of greatness seemed impossible. Yet, through all his trials, Joseph never lost faith in God. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph tells his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's failure, betrayal, and suffering were not in vain. They were part of God's greater plan to bring him to a place of influence where he could save his family and an entire nation from famine. Failure in God's economy is not a permanent condition. God uses our mistakes and setbacks to refine us, to teach us perseverance, and to help us rely on his strength rather than our own abilities. Romans 8:28 reminds us that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. God doesn't waste our failures. He redeems them, and he uses them to shape us into the people he desires us to be. As children, we may not always understand the purpose behind our failures. We may think that failure means we are unworthy or incapable. But the Bible teaches us that failure is not the end of the story. It's often the beginning of God's greater work in our lives. God does not measure our worth by our mistakes. Instead, he uses our failures to teach us humility, to grow our faith, and to prepare us for the future he has planned. In times of failure, it's essential to remember that God is not finished with us. He is shaping us, molding us, and equipping us for what lies ahead. Just as he used Peter's failure to strengthen him for leadership, and Joseph's failure to prepare him for greatness, God is using our mistakes to prepare us for the incredible purposes he has set before us. So if you find yourself in a season of failure or disappointment, don't give up. Don't allow your mistakes to define you. God is working in you, refining you, and preparing you for something greater. Your failure is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter where God will use you in ways you never imagined. Trust him in the process and know that he is faithful to complete the work he has started in you. Throughout childhood, many of us experience moments of deep rejection. Whether it's being excluded by friends, overlooked by family, or feeling abandoned in our most vulnerable moments, rejection can leave a profound scar on the heart. But the Bible reminds us that even in our rejection, God is still at work in our lives, using these painful experiences to draw us closer to him and to prepare us for the future he has planned. One of the most powerful examples of rejection in Scripture is the life of David. As a young boy, David was rejected by his own family. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David's father, Jesse, didn't even consider him as a candidate. Instead, Jesse presented all of his older sons, and it wasn't until Samuel asked if there were any others that David was brought in from the fields. In 1 Samuel 16:11-13, we read, "So he asked Jesse, 'Are these all the sons you have?' 'There is still the youngest,' Jesse answered. 'He is tending the sheep.' Samuel said, 'Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives.' David, the youngest and most overlooked, was the one God had chosen. Despite his rejection by his own family, God had a greater purpose for him. David's rejection was not a sign of being unworthy, but an opportunity for God to reveal his plan and to use David in a mighty way. Jesus himself experienced rejection in the most profound way. In John 1:11 we read, "He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him." Jesus, the Son of God, was rejected by the very people he came to save, the Israelites. In his hometown of Nazareth, he was rejected and mocked by those who had known him as a child. In Matthew 13:57, we see how the people responded to him, and they took offense at him. Yet, despite the rejection, Jesus knew that his mission was not dependent on human acceptance. He was secure in his Father's love and calling. Jesus' rejection ultimately led to the salvation of the world, as his death on the cross was the greatest act of love and redemption the world has ever known. Rejection is a painful experience, but it is not a sign of failure or abandonment. God often uses rejection to prepare us for something greater, teaching us to find our identity and worth in Him alone. In Romans 8:31-32, Paul writes, "What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things?" This powerful truth reminds us that God is for us, even when others are against us. His love is constant and unchanging, and no rejection can diminish our worth in His eyes. When we face rejection, it is easy to feel worthless or overlooked, but God's Word reassures us that our value is not determined by the approval of others. We are chosen and loved by God, and His plans for us are not thwarted by the rejection of the world. In fact, God often uses rejection to refine us, to make us more dependent on Him, and to teach us to find our validation in His love alone. Jesus was rejected by men, but He was chosen by God to accomplish the greatest mission in history. Similarly, our rejection is not a reflection of our worth, but a part of God's process of preparing us for the unique calling He has placed on our lives. If you are experiencing rejection in your life, take comfort in the fact that you are not alone. Jesus understands your pain. He experienced rejection on the deepest level, and yet He overcame it. He knows what it feels like to be overlooked, misunderstood, and abandoned. And He promises to be with you in your moments of rejection, offering His love, His peace, and His presence. Psalm 27:10 reminds us, "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." Even in our deepest moments of rejection, God will never leave us. He will receive us with open arms, and He will use those experiences to shape us into the people He has called us to be. So, when you feel rejected, remember that God is still at work in your life. He is using that rejection to draw you closer to Him, to help you find your identity in His love, and to prepare you for the incredible future He has planned for you. You are chosen, you are loved, and you are never truly rejected when you are in the arms of your Heavenly Father. Throughout childhood, we all face moments of loneliness, times when we feel abandoned, isolated, or unseen by those around us. These moments can be some of the most difficult and painful experiences of our lives. Yet, in these moments of solitude, God often works the most profoundly, drawing us closer to Himself and teaching us the power of His presence. The Bible is filled with examples of individuals who experienced deep loneliness, but whose faith in God transformed those moments into times of growth, purpose, and intimacy with the Lord. One such person was the prophet Elijah. In 1 Kings 19, after Elijah had confronted the prophets of Baal and seen God's miraculous victory, he fled into the wilderness, afraid for his life. He sat under a broom tree and prayed, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." 1 Kings 19:4. Elijah was deeply lonely, feeling as though he was the only faithful servant of God left on earth. In that moment of isolation, God didn't rebuke him but gently met him where he was. God's response to Elijah's loneliness was profound. He provided food and rest. and then spoke to Elijah not through the powerful wind, earthquake, or fire, but through a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. In Elijah's deepest moments of loneliness, God revealed his presence and his intimate care. Elijah was not alone. God was with him, even in the silence and solitude. Another powerful example of God's presence in loneliness is seen in the life of David. Before becoming king, David spent many years in the wilderness, fleeing from King Saul's jealousy and seeking refuge in caves and deserts. During this time, he was often alone, facing great trials and uncertainties. But in his solitude, David learned to rely on God's strength and to worship him deeply. In Psalm 34:18, David writes, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." David's loneliness became a place where he discovered God's faithfulness and his nearness in times of hardship. Perhaps the most powerful example of loneliness is found in the life of Jesus. On the night of his betrayal, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, and there he experienced a depth of loneliness that none of us can fully comprehend. He asked his disciples to stay awake and pray with him, but they fell asleep. In Matthew 26:38, Jesus confides in them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Yet, in his greatest hour of need, even his closest companions abandoned him. On the cross, Jesus experienced the ultimate loneliness when he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. Jesus, the Son of God, experienced the loneliness of abandonment so that we would never have to face that depth of isolation without him. In our own lives, loneliness can feel like an overwhelming darkness, but the Bible reassures us that God is near to the lonely. In Psalm 68:6, it says, "God sets the lonely in families." Even when we feel isolated, God is always present, always offering his comfort and his companionship. Loneliness often reveals to us how much we need God's presence, and it is in those moments that he draws near, offering us a deep, intimate relationship with him. When you find yourself lonely, remember that you are never truly alone. God promises to be with you even in your solitude. Isaiah 41:10 offers us this beautiful reminder, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." No matter how deep the loneliness may feel, God is right there with you, offering his peace, his comfort, and his strength. Loneliness also serves as an opportunity for us to draw closer to God. In our solitude, we are invited to seek his presence and to find our worth and identity in him alone. Just as God met Elijah in his loneliness with a gentle whisper, he meets us in our quiet places, offering us his presence in ways that are often more profound than in the busyness of life. So, if you are experiencing loneliness, remember that it is not a sign of abandonment, but a moment where God can work deeply in your life. He is with you, and he will never leave you or forsake you. Your loneliness is not wasted. It is a time where God can draw you nearer to himself, helping you discover his faithfulness, his comfort, and his unconditional love. Embrace these moments as opportunities to deepen your relationship with him, and know that he is always with you, even in your solitude.